On to episode number 8 already. Man, time is flying. So today I want to talk about a whole new type of countertop. Just, when you didn't think it could get any harder to choose a surface for your kitchen, a whole new category emerges. That is ultra compact surfaces. Shish. Welcome back to the channel. I hope everybody is having an awesome day out there. And today I want to talk about a new countertop surface as we continue to discuss countertops as a whole, and that is ultra compact surfaces. Now, for the sake of easiness and avoiding saying ultra compact surfaces over and over again, you will hear me interchange that with Dekton. However, be aware that Dekton is a brand made by Cosentino and doesn't represent the entire genre as a whole. There are other brands out there like Neolinth and Lamitech. So what the heck is Dekton, or an ultra compact surface? Well, this is a relatively new group of countertops, more specifically new to North America, and it combines the raw materials of porcelain, glass, and quartz. And it puts these materials under extreme heat and pressure, effectively mimicking what would be a metamorphic change that would take place over thousands of years in nature. This process is known as sinterized particle technology. So when I say extreme heat and pressure, I mean it. We're talking pressure at about 5,900 psi, that's pounds per square inch, and temperatures in ovens that reach up to about 1,200 degrees Celsius, and that's roughly 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit for my American friends. I'll throw a number down the corner if that's way off. The goal here was to create a material that is nearly indestructible while still keeping it really easy to maintain. So take Dekton, for example, which is made by Cosentino, the same company that makes Silestone quartz. Now, a note there, if you remember, Silestone is one of the quartz that often finds its way onto my shortlist. I've worked with them in the past. They're a great product. So effectively, what they wanted to do was take their Silestone quartz material, a product that is super popular kind of across the world already, and improve upon it. Now, before I dive any further into this subject, and before we start kind of referring to Dekton as the primary point of discussion, I do want to take a minute and discuss the few other brands as a whole. Now, by no means am I an expert in this field whatsoever. I've done quite a bit of research, and this is what I found. However, if there's somebody that knows more than I do, or that wants to correct some of the information I've made, please leave a comment down below so we can all learn together. From my reading, Dekton appears to be the most widespread material available. Now, this largely could just come down to marketing, being that it's a large company behind it in Cosentino. Another brand out there, Neolinth, is similar, but supposedly slightly more dense. Now, according to Consumer Reports, it also was better at resisting chipping and nicking compared to Dekton, and this could be due to the fact that it is a more dense structure. The final brand I mentioned earlier, Lamitech, it has a slightly different process, and it doesn't put its veining and its particles or its colors in an enameled surface like Dekton, and this makes it less scratch resistant overall. Like I said, by no means an expert on sintered stone countertops or ultra compact surfaces, so if anybody has more information with regards to differences between these brands or has worked with these brands, make sure to leave a comment down below. Alright, so what are the benefits to going with a sintered countertop like Dekton? Well, first and foremost, they're durable, very durable. You can cut right on them, you can slide pots around, you can kind of go about your daily wear and tear that you would put on a kitchen without actually worrying that your countertops are going to take a massive hit. Dekton is heat proof. Yes, heat proof, not just heat resistance. Just in case you feel like doing some mild welding or soldering on your countertop. But in all seriousness, these countertops, or this group of countertops, kind of claim to be the best in this category when it comes to any sort of heat resistance. Now, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I really don't see the hype around having a heat-proof countertop. I'm fine putting a trivet down, a hot plate, it doesn't really bother me. Now, there is certain exceptions to this that I do understand. Say if you're using a product, something like that in VisiCook, where you're embedding that cooktop right under your countertop. Another perk to these countertops is they are more or less stain resistant and do not need sealing. So just like quartz, you can kind of set them and forget them, and you don't have to worry about that general maintenance in terms of sealing them every couple years down the road. Dekton doesn't etch like some of the softer stones. Seriously, I found a report where someone actually tried to use battery acid, and I think that sits at like a pH of 0.5 or 0.7, and they still couldn't get these countertops to etch. It can also stand up to UV rays, so if you're looking for something for an outdoor kitchen, this might be a good choice to consider. Maybe. More on this a little later. And finally, it's versatile. Dectin can be used for wall cladding, architectural panels, flooring, but I mean, who cares? We're interested in countertops here. Now, what about those downsides? Well, first and foremost, Dectin is prone to chipping and potentially cracking. So according to Consumer Reports, and I'm going to read this verbatim so I get it right. Dectin resisted damage from heat, stains, chopping, cutting, scoring excellent in these tests, and was very good at resisting abrasion. But in our impact tests, pieces of the edges chipped off and Dectin cracked in 2 pieces on samples that were 2 centimeters thick, the manufacturer recommended thickness. Our impact tests simulate what could happen if a heavy pot fell from a shelf or a pot rack anywhere up to 2 feet above the counter. None of the other 13 materials tested in this category cracked this way. Now, on that note, they did reach out to Dectin or Cosentino for a comment, and Lorenzo Marquez had this to say. We were pleased that Dectin achieved high scores in regard to its resiliency to heat, staining, and cutting, says Lorenzo Marquez. However, we were disappointed to learn that Dectin cracked in specific tests that simulated dropping a weighted object onto a surface from height. Unfortunately, we are unable to validate the results as these testing conditions didn't comply with our own installation guidelines. Cosentino stands behind Dectin and the advantages that come with its ultra-compact composition, offering high levels of performance to withstand normal levels of wear and tear. Now, I will leave it up to you, however you want to interpret that. However, here's my takeaway. It doesn't really matter to me if the installation wasn't done exactly to Cosentino's guidelines, because it wasn't for any of the other products as well. So the fact that it chipped and, well, cracked all the way through is still of some relevance. Alright, I just want to take a quick minute here to interrupt things, because I forgot to mention something and I think it's rather important. So, Dectin is solid colored all the way through, meaning it's got the same color you see, that generic color, all the way to the inside of its core. However, the veining or that finish, whatever is on top, doesn't extend past that surface. So if you were ever to chip something right in the middle of the vein, you could wind up with an area that is chipped out and looks quite different than the finished surface. Another thing I never really dove into is repair. Now, Dectin can be repaired most of the time with a resin-based sealant. Now, the extent of the repair, how it looks, all of that really comes down to the amount of damage and the type of damage done. Now, I'm not going to say this is not a DIY type fix, because it does look like the materials are available in order to do this yourself. However, it does appear to be on the more difficult end of the spectrum. Finally, I know there's probably going to be a decent amount of interest in comparing these ultra compact surfaces or Dectin countertops to porcelain countertops. And that is something we'll be discussing, but we'll be doing so under the porcelain video, which we'll be tackling next week, so stay tuned for that. Alrighty, back to the regular scheduled programming. So to touch back on that outdoor application, if you live in an area that, say, gets frequent hailstorms, or is a really windy location that, say, has lots of falling tree branches, maybe this isn't a product you want to consider after all. Now, again, this is one isolated test, one isolated set of tests from Consumer Reports, and probably isn't indicative of the product as a whole, and maybe it would fare slightly different under different conditions. However, it is something you should be aware of. Another downside is that Dectin must be professionally installed. There is no DIY route here, and in fact, fabricators and installers actually need to go through a special certification in order to do so. So to take that a little further, it might actually be difficult to find a fabricator that lives somewhat near you. And even if you do, and say there's only 1 or 2 options, that really limits your pool or your ability to shop around. That's quite a bit different than, say, something like quartz or granite or marble, where there's likely to be dozens of different fabricators that you can go and talk to, pick their brains about their expertise, and find the best one for your specific application. Finally, like all of the other stone countertops we've discussed, I'm going to throw cost here as well. It falls right in line with that category, so it's not necessarily a downside in comparison to those, but it is definitely at the higher end of the budget spectrum. So let's move on to maintenance. Well, much like quartz countertops, this is going to be a pretty short discussion. There's not a heck of a lot to do here except to wipe your countertops down with a little bit of soap and water and give them a clean. What I did find interesting though was Dectin's own outline on their website for removing stubborn stains. They advise the use of different solvents and detergents to get the job done. Before we finish up this video, let's take a minute to look at the environmental impact of Dectin. Now, I wasn't really sure what I would find with this category. It's relatively unknown and I didn't know how much was going to be out there. However, what I did come across was rather interesting. The Cosentino Group obtained the Environmental Product Declaration for Dectin after an analysis of the environmental impact from cradle to grave, essentially its life cycle. This certificate is granted by the International EDP System, accrediting Cosentino's commitment to sustainability and waste reduction. Another notable point is one of their products, Trillium, is the first product to be made completely out of recycled materials. Finally, the main materials, those raw materials used to make sintered countertops, are 100% natural, so it's all pretty good news when it comes to the environmental impact. The only real downside comes from the carbon footprint of the manufacturing and transport process. We've hit that point in the video where I like to ask that same question, is it right for you? There's a lot of really good positives when it comes to these countertops without that many downsides. So let me know down in the comments, if you were thinking about quartz or a natural stone, could you be swayed over to that ultra compact surface or that Dectin countertop? I'm curious, let me know. Thanks a ton for watching and we'll see you all next time.